What's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well. This is my final project for Intellectual Heritage 2. And today I'm going to be talking about the two texts, Borderlands by Gloria Anzaldúa and The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. And these two texts were pretty powerful to me and my personal favorites of the semester. Now, in both of these texts, they have a lot of similarities, but the ones I'm going to focus on today is how both characters and authors, in their works, they expressed how people are mistreated and criticized for things they can't control. And I wrote a little bit about this in my reflection. Something that I go by in my life is don't judge people for things they can't control. And in both of these texts, you see people judging these characters for things they can't control. Um, in Borderlands, we see Anzaldúa really struggle with the amount of criticism and the amount of bullying she receives from her peers, from her, from the people outside. Um, and even in her culture, which we'll get into later, we talked about it during the last little podcast episode. But she faced so much criticism and so many critiques for things she can't control and for things she shouldn't even be criticized about. Mainly, we talked a lot about language. Someone grows up speaking a language, right? And she was one of the main things that people were coming for her for was for speaking Spanish. I'm not gonna go too deep into it because I went deep into it my last um project, but it's very disheartening to see that happened to her. Um and connecting it to the other no, first let's talk about okay, no, let's connect it to the other text. And the Souls of Black Folk, we see that the author really sharing a lot of his experiences about racism, um, which, racism of any type is just wrong and ridiculous. But it's kind of disheartening to me to see how relatable this this text is. Me being in 2021 reading this, I'm like, wow, listen, this is a lot of relatable stuff. Um, Now let's see a quote from the boys I could use. Hmm. Let's use. There's a lot of good quotes in this text. I really enjoyed it. So right in the beginning, we see a quote. It says, "Between me and the other world, there is an unasked question, excuse me, unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. All nevertheless flutter around it. They approach me in half hesitant sort of way, eye me curiously or compassionately, and then instead of saying directly, 'How does it feel to be a problem?' they say, 'I know an excellent colored man in my town,' or I fought in Mechanicsville, or 'Do not these southern outrages make your blood boil?' At these I smile, or am interested, or reduce the boiling to a simmer, as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem? I answer seldom a word." Now, here we see another person who's being chastised for something he can't control, the color of his skin. Um, he's seen as a problem in this society for the color of his skin, and like I said before, not well. A lot's have changed in terms of racial. issues in this country, but there's still a lot we need to work on. You know, to be seen as a problem just because of the color of your skin is just sad. Um, it's sad. It's very sad. Now, tying this all back into the common good, I noted in my one of my early discussion posts that one of the factors in order to live a good life is happiness. Now, upon reading these texts and upon, pondering deeply, as I often like to do, it begs the question, how many how happy can one be when living under these conditions? When you're being constantly chastised for your culture, just being who you are. When when you're and again, this is from both sides too. Um, Another thing I forgot to mention, this is from both sides. In Anzaldua, from her example, people were calling her a cultural traitor. A quote, "You've been speaking the oppressor's language by speaking English. You're ruining the Spanish language. I've been accused by various Latinos and Latinas." That's from Borderlands. And then in Dubois' text, I'm talking about Mr. Washington. Um, Among his own people, however, Mr. Washington has encountered the strongest and most lasting opposition, amounting at times to bitterness, and even today, continuing strong and insistent, even though largely silenced in outward expression by the public opinion of the nation. So even within their own communities, respective communities and respective societies, respective cultures, they are facing criticism. So my question is, to what extent, how is a person supposed to be happy if they're constantly um if they constantly have to deal with this stuff, you know? I would argue, of course, everyone has their um challenges in life, but I would argue that people who aren't of color, who don't have to experience these things, have a better pathway to happiness than people who have to deal with these every day. Now, some people might be able to deal with it. They might, over the course of their life, they might be able to tune it out, ignore it. They might, it depends on each individual circumstance. But that's my big question, you know? How can one be happy when having to deal with constant um criticism for things they can't control, for just being themselves? So, in conclusion, to wrap everything up, and I think one of the biggest things I'm taking away of this class is that I want everyone, we all have our preconceived, judgments about people, or we have, you know, um, we might hold some stereotypes about a group of people. It's human. Now, I want everyone to take the step to try to dismantle that in your life. If you know that you are prejudiced against a certain group of people, if you know that you look at a certain group of people a certain way, take the step to to get rid of that, because in order to live a good life, you might live the best life ever. But we're talking about the common good here. What's good for everybody, not what's good for you. What's good for everybody. You have to making this small change for yourself will benefit everyone in the long run. So that's my big thing. That's what I want. That's what I'm taking away from this course. That's what I want, a lot of people to also take away. I enjoyed this little semester. It was about a month and a few weeks long, but very educational. I love the texts we read. Great class, everyone. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your summer.